Hi, I'm sure every one of us has gone through times when we lose track of time when we are doing something. We are so engrossed in an action that we don't realize how many hours pass by. Right? My name is Indrakshi Singh Chundawat and today we are going to be talking about flow state. So flow state is something related to locking in. Locking in is a more casual term used by the Gen Z to refer to flow state. Although these are not exactly the same things, lock-in happens over a longer period of time and flow state is essentially an episode. It lasts maybe 1 hour, 2 hours or 3 hours, right? Depending on different people, it lasts for different amount of time, right? So flow state, it can be easily explained with the help of these matrix. This was given by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. The name is tough, but we don't need to get into all of that jargon. So what happens when we understand this matrix is that we begin to understand flow state and we begin to understand how to reach flow state, because it can be tough. We don't know, for even in our daily lives, we never know when we are going to reach flow state. When we are doing something, when you're listening to music and the best songs keep coming up one after another, that's when we reach flow state. We don't realize how much time has passed by because we are enjoying the music. When we are playing an instrument or when we are solving math problems, if you're a student, when you're solving math problems, you reach flow state. If you are a chef, you will reach flow state when you're cooking. So for different people, flow state happens during different actions, during different times and for different amount of times, right? So let's begin with this matrix. On the y-axis I have challenge and on the x-axis I have skills, and the scale goes from low to high on either sides, right? So let's begin with low challenge and low skill. So when there is a low challenge and there is low skill, we are in a state of apathy. So there are 4 states that we will divide our actions into. Different actions, they push us into different states. So for an action that has a low challenge and low skill criteria, this action causes apathy, right? Apathy is when there is a lack of motivation and there is a lack of desire to complete the task at hand. Let's assume you ask a 20-year-old guy to read a children's book, right? When a 20-year-old guy reads a children's book, he already understands the language, he already knows the stories for the most part, and these stories begin to feel boring to him, right? Because there is a low challenge and there is a low skill requirement. He doesn't require any exceptional skills, right? So reading a children's storybook for a 20-year-old guy would cause apathy. Or when you're copying notes from one notebook to another, you're mindlessly writing notes by copying from one notebook to another. You don't require any skill, you're not trying to understand anything, and you don't require skill, you just have to write. That is also one thing that could cause apathy. So many actions like that for different people, like I said, for different people, different actions cause apathy, anxiety and all of that. So this is called apathy, when there is a low challenge and there is a low skill, right? Our next state is anxiety, an anxious state. So this happens. Now I'll use a recurring example on my channel, public speaking. When you're asked to give a speech on the stage, you feel anxious. So why do you feel that? Because you feel that there is a high challenge. You feel that I have never done this before and it's scary, so the challenge is high. And you also feel that you have low skill. Your communication is not great, your command over the language is not great. So you begin to think that you have low skill and there is a high challenge, so it causes anxiety. It makes you anxious, it pushes you into a state of anxiety, right? Our next state would be boredom, right? Now this is something that happens among students a lot. So for each semester there is a subject that's really easy that causes the students to get bored. For me, in my first semester, there was a subject called environmental science. Now environmental science, it's an informational subject. You just have to read the notes and you go and give the answers. You have an MCQ, you have MCQ based test and you have a Viva, and that's it. It's not tough. So you have enough skill for this action. Reading the notes, it does not require a lot of skill. You just have to read the notes, and most of the information that's written inside an environmental textbook, we already have that information from our school, from our primary school, from middle school, from high school, and all of that. So it does not require a lot of skill. So the challenge is low because you just have to read the notes and go appear for the test, and the skill that we already possess for the act of studying that subject is already high. So it causes boredom. This is why many a times environmental science is boring for many people, right? Now our next state would be flow state. This is the most important state. This is what we are essentially trying to understand. Flow is when you strike the perfect balance between challenge and skill. So what happens here is, now you never know how much challenge an action is going to impose on you, or how much skill is required to do something, right? So this happens when you are solving math problems. For example, let's assume you're trying to learn calculus and you are solving easier problems. You just learned how to derivate and you're solving derivation problems. Now initially what happens is, you feel like there is a slight challenge, then you practice and then you practice and practice, and then you begin to get a grip of the topic and you reach flow state. You're solving the problem, your brain rewards you for getting the answer. It feels like gratification, you're gratified, then you solve the next problem, it gives you motivation to solve the next problem, and then you solve the next problem and you get the answer, you once again get gratification, and the next problem, it becomes a cycle. And as long as you're in that cycle, you are in a flow state, right? So this was the matrix. Now I'm going to tell you how to reach flow state. Now reaching flow state is not easy, and for the most part it is often random. You never know when you're going to reach flow state. You don't sit on your study table thinking that today I am going to reach flow state. It doesn't work like that. So flow state happens with two kinds of actions. The first type of actions that will cause you to reach flow state is when the action requires practicing, right? And the second type of action that is going to push you into a flow state is when you are discovering, right? So we often see children, I am not sure how much of it is true during this age, but back when I was a kid, I used to have an encyclopedia. And when I used to read that encyclopedia, I would constantly find out new things about the world. I would read chapters on religion, I would read chapters on technology, on space, on plants and animals. So I was constantly discovering something new, right? So that would put me into a flow state. I wouldn't realize when an hour would have passed by, because that book would look really interesting to me. It was the most interesting thing for me in the world. So in that moment, nothing outside of that encyclopedia mattered to me. So for many children, this happens when they are reading encyclopedias, or when people are playing video games, because video games they give you challenges, right? You must solve this challenge, and you also require skill for it. So when you strike the perfect balance between the challenge and the skill, you reach flow state. This is how you reach flow state. So discovery is when a child reads encyclopedia. So that's one action that could push a kid into a flow state, right? Another one is practice. This happens mostly for athletes. They are practicing a certain, let's say we have a cricketer and he's trying to practice a certain type of shot, right? He's trying to practice bowling, right? I don't have a lot of knowledge about cricket, but let's say there is a style of bowling that a bowler is trying to master, and he's practicing it for hours and he reaches flow state. He does not realize when 3 hours pass by. So that is flow state for him, and this is practice-induced flow state. For the child, reading the encyclopedia was a discovery-induced flow state. For the athlete, practicing the bowling style was a practice-induced flow state. So different flow states for different people that last for different amounts. So this is how you reach flow state. You must strike the perfect balance between challenge and skill. So this was the flow state matrix, and this was how you reach flow state, this by striking the perfect balance between challenge and skill. and I hope you use this knowledge during your winter arc, because this is the last quarter of 2026 and the winter arc is just about to start. So use this and maybe things will be easier for you.